Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to discuss the question of balance changes, patch 3.22, and most importantly, whether Heatshiver should be nerfed or made more rare, because it is such a powerful item at the moment. Now my conclusion here is actually going to be in favour of the status quo. I don't think this item needs to be nerfed. I think that might surprise a few people because I definitely am someone who is willing to call for nerfs when I think something is too good. However, I think the current situation with Heatshiver is it is a very powerful item, but that it is one that is causing a number of builds that otherwise would not be played at all to instead see moderate play, and it is not being a boot stomping down on build diversity the way that overpowered items in the past have been. For example, Crystallized Omniscience in patch 3.17, patch 3.18, it was absolutely a boot stomping on build diversity across the whole league. People who would come up with an interesting build idea would just say, you know what, this would be much better if I took off the amulet, made it Crystallized Omniscience, and then changed all of the rest of the gear in order to suit that. That's not the case with Heatshiver. Heatshiver is taking a number of builds that otherwise wouldn't be played at all and is raising them up to a level where they're pretty competitive. A quick note on this item was absolute trash until it was giga buffed in patch 3.19. It went from something that no one was interested in wearing into one of the best helmets in the game, just like that. The reason for that is the additional line, gain 100% of cold damage as extra fire damage against frozen enemies. This was new, so was a couple other things on the item, but that's the line that matters, and it meant that this ended up being one of the best items you could wear if you're playing a build that was regularly critically striking whilst dealing cold damage to enemies. At that point, Heatshiver became one of your best options. So let's have a look at the builds that have been using this powerful item in the Crucible expansion. So firstly, this is POE Ninja. This is a list of 96,193 high-level characters across the Crucible League. It's not an absolutely perfect cross-section, but I do think it's the best we're likely to see. Amongst these players, there's approximately 12% who are wearing Heatshiver as their helmet. You will notice that this is actually not the most common of the various unique items that are being worn. So if we have a look here, Watcher's Eye doesn't really count. There's a lot of different versions of this item. It's not really one item. Same goes for Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame. Lethal Pride, on the other hand, is being used by twice as many people as are using Heatshiver. Threat of Hope is being used by a lot. Taste of Hate is being used by a lot. Mage Blood's being used by a lot. This item is staggeringly rare, and so it's something that only the top maybe 2 or 3% of Path of Exile players can afford. But it is something that is being used by pretty much everyone that's got access to it. Then we have Bottled Faith, Brutal Restraint, Impossible Escape, Dying Sun, Ashes of the Stars, Unnatural Instinct, which is also a Drop Anywhere unique item. Then we have Calm Spirit, which is the same rarity tier as Heatshiver, and then we have Heatshiver itself. Let's have a look at the skills people are using amongst high-level characters in general. Now this is going to include both people who do use Heatshiver and people who don't use Heatshiver. We have Lightning Arrow at 9%, Righteous Fire and Fire Trap at 7%, that's one build. Devouring Totem we won't count because this is a build that's not going to exist next league. It is the builds that are based around the Crucible Totem Explosion nodes. Val Lightning Arrow is just part of Lightning Arrow. We have Cyclone, which is actually a few different builds. There's Cyclone Shockwave, there's Cyclone Custom Critical Strike. We have Tornado Shot, we have Ice Spear, Spectral Shield Throw, and Bone Shatter. What about when we restrict it to only look at those builds that are using Heatshiver? And what you'll see is that when we do that, we're going to get a different selection of skills. Firstly, we have Spectral Shield Throw. Now this was on the list before, but this is a skill that is much better in patch 3.21, where various ridiculous Crucible enhanced versions of Emperor's Vigilance exist. These won't exist next league, and as a result, Spectral Shield Throw will be much less popular. Then we have Frostblades, Ice Shot, more Devouring Totems, again won't exist next league, Tornado Shot, Blade Vortex, Flicker Strike, and a whole bunch of other things, Spark, Ice Trap, whole number of things that aren't really popular without Heatshiver. And that's the key reason that I don't think that this item needs to be nerfed. It is something that is taking a whole bunch of skills that aren't quite worth playing, and it's raising them up to the level that they're pretty competitive. So one of the suggestions a number of players have when an item is deemed as being a bit too strong is to address that power through balance through rarity. I think this was a complete failure the last time that it really mattered, and this is why I'm not going to endorse making Heatshiver rarer. I think Heatshiver's in the perfect rarity slot at the moment. Crystallized Omniscience was an item that was completely and utterly broken when it was first added to the game in patch 3.17. In a 3.21 game, this item reads as you see it on the screen now, 1% to all elemental resistances per 15 omniscience, and penetrate 1% elemental resistances per 15 omniscience. With these numbers, 15 and 15, this is a compelling choice for your amulet slot, but it is not something that feels forced. It's not something that feels better than every other option in the game. It is just something that is a very good choice that you can build a character around, but that you don't feel you have to change your character in order to use. In patches 3.17 and 3.18, this number 15 was replaced by 10. This made the item ridiculously better. Instead of providing 80% to cold, fire, and lightning resist, and also 80% elemental penetration, it was instead providing 120%. Or if your character had more omniscience, instead of providing 100, 100, 100, 100 to those stats, it was 150, 150, 150, 150. This item was so powerful in patches 3.17 and 3.18 that honestly no other amulet in the game was close to competitive for the amulet slot. There was the odd build that couldn't use Crystallized Omniscience, maybe you were playing a Cyclone build that was using Brutality, but in that case usually your best bet was to just respec your character into something that could use Crystallized Omniscience. It was that good. So Crystallized Omniscience was basically functioning as a boot stomping down on build diversity across the league, and the result of the Rarity nerf that it got at the end of patch 3.17, where its drop rate was reduced by approximately a factor of 10, didn't actually change that at all. In fact, it actually became more commonly used in 3.18 than it was in 3.17, despite being something like 10 times rarer. And so for that reason, I don't think you can really balance something that is fundamentally broken through making it rarer. Additionally, Heatshiver's not fundamentally broken. Heatshiver's increasing build diversity at the moment. So for that reason, I'm not really a fan of any proposals to make this item rarer. I'm also not really a fan of any proposals to nerf it. Unless, and I think this one's important, unless GGG are looking through a list of skills that they think, you know what, we could make this skill better, but the reason we can't do it is because as soon as we do that, Heatshiver is going to break the game. If that's the situation, then yeah, I'm fine with them deciding, right, we'll sacrifice Heatshiver so that we can buff other skills. But if that's not the case, I think Heatshiver should stay exactly where it is. I think it should stay as one of the few genuinely accessible unique items that is really powerful to build around, and that is something that you can reliably acquire yourself if you're someone who plays the game a lot, and that you can reliably trade for if you're someone who plays the game a little bit less. That's all I got on this. May Volobs have interesting results, and I will see you around.